Hello again, everybody. My name is Mike Petraglia for CLNS Radio with the Gillette Report on the Pats Beat. Today, here on Saturday, the Patriots had practice in the rain in full pads, at least the rain for the second half of practice. I'm joined by Steve Balestrieri of PatsFans.com. He does a remarkable job, I think, and a great job of really breaking down the Patriots roster and giving you inside or in-depth insight to what maybe to expect as the Patriots get started with the preseason schedule on Thursday against the Jacksonville Jaguars. There are not a lot of key decisions to make, but certainly in terms of depth areas, there will be some surprising moves, I'm sure, some surprising cuts, and Steve is here to break it all down based on what we've seen in the first 10 days or so of training camp in 2017. Begin today, Steve, with what we saw from one of the guys, the wide receiver, trying to really make an impression in a group that is remarkably deep, and that is Devin Lucien. He made a great leaping grab towards the end of practice in the rain on a pass from Jimmy Garoppolo. Your thoughts on Devin Lucien, what he really can expect in terms of trying to make this roster or at least look towards a practice squad spot?
Well, thanks for having me. And, the play Lucien made I thought was fantastic because the ball was actually thrown over his wrong shoulder. He adjusted to the ball in the air. I thought he made a tremendous leaping grab. He was able to pull it down with the rain at that time was pouring. Now it's almost stopped for us. So the situation at that time was a lot more difficult.
You know, a lot of fans turned out here and they saw the radar on their iPhones, on their smartphones, and were like, uh-oh, practice is going to be cut short. Not the case whatsoever. The big smile on Bill Belichick's face, no doubt, when he was told that midway through practice here on Saturday, you'd get some heavy, steady rain, not thunderstorms. We were lucky in that regard because had there been thunder and lightning, I'm sure they would have called it off and moved inside. But this was a chance to work on ball security skills, ball security drills, I should say. And we saw some of that. Jonathan Jones with a bit of a muff on a kickoff. And we saw some other situations where the Patriots quarterbacks had some trouble fielding the ball, Tom Brady and Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, one of the snaps for Tom Brady I thought wasn't a very good snap, but he was able to recover quickly enough where he was able to throw the football. In Jimmy's case, there was another bad snap, and that kind of skipped behind him, and he had to lay down on the ball when they were in that up-tempo offensive period. So that would have been a drive killer.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, that in terms of the panic level for Jimmy Garoppolo, it really didn't ease up too much today here on Saturday as Jimmy Garoppolo made a couple of really good passes in individual drills and, 4-on-4 and empty set 4 receiver looks and empty sets 7-on-7 situations. But when it got to 11-on-11, we saw a lot of running. And then when Jimmy Garoppolo did start to pass late, again, he was hit and miss.
Yeah, he was. And the worst throw he made of the day was picked off by Nate Ebner, yeah. He overthrew Tony Washington deep into the sideline of the end zone, and I thought that was probably right after that Devin Lucien play, which was probably his best, was his worst.
Well, I think what we look for in that regard, Steve, is how he reacts. And I noticed after that play, as Nate Ebner hauled it in at the goal line, Jimmy hung his head. And I don't think Bill Belichick wants to see that. I mean, you get frustrated and whatever, but when you hang your head, that's bad body language for the rest of your teammates. And, I think, we have seen Jimmy struggle in camps before. This is not unusual. It's certainly been a situation that the coaching staff has gone through before, but they know what they have in Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think once the preseason games get underway, we'll have a much better read on just where Jimmy Garoppolo is.
Absolutely. And, Jimmy hasn't been the greatest practice player. We've known that. We've seen it out here. But he's been able to turn it on for the games. And I thought today, as soon as he let that go, he knew he had thrown it too far. And he kind of hung his head a little. You don't like to see that, like as you mentioned. But that's a learning curve for him. And, I think we've seen that he's not ready yet to push Tom Brady. And that was a storyline going into the spring. Whether, Jimmy would start to push him, I don't think that's the case.
No, it doesn't appear to be the case whatsoever. Let's move on to some other wide receivers, namely Danny Amendola. He returned to practice today, and he spoke to us after the Saturday session, and he said, of most note, I thought, he was asked why by Mike Reese of ESPN Boston, why did he decide to come back here to New England? And he said, I love it here. This is the place for me.
Yeah, he said he loves the fans. He loves the competition here. And, he's proven himself to be that clutch guy. His numbers aren't eye-popping with the Patriots, but, when you look at his production, they're always in big situations in big games. So,
and I asked Danny how the wide receiver room, as they say in football phraseology, how it has changed, how it has evolved, Steve. When he came here, the receivers were a very good group. They executed. They were known for their execution. They were known for their under routes. It has transformed into potentially a big play receiving group, obviously, namely the addition of Brandon Cooks from the New Orleans Saints in the offseason, but also rookie Malcolm Mitchell. He also was on the field briefly before going down to conditioning here on Saturday at Gillette Stadium. But the room overall, Danny Amendola acknowledged that it has transformed into a group of receivers that know what they're doing when they step on the field. And when you know what you're doing, that's when the big plays happen.
Absolutely. And, not only with the guys who have been here, they picked up a couple of young guys, too. Austin Carr, I think.
Someone who really doesn't get talked about a lot, but really should. He is impressed early in camp.
Absolutely. And, if maybe on another season we'd be looking at Austin Carr as a lock for this roster, it's going to be tough to keep him around. But he's another guy that seems to have, jumped in seamlessly into the Patriots offense. And they have a dynamic group. They're going to be fun to watch.
Brandon Bolden, he also spoke to reporters after practice on Saturday. He talked about the joy of his offseason, the birth of his second child, a daughter, 5 months ago. And, his wife hates him right now because he's here not taking care of the kids. But Brandon Bolden has been a terrific player here in Boston, in New England, on special teams. Everybody knows that. Great in the locker room. But he's one guy that, on your roster projection, probably may not make it because of the numbers game.
No, with the the additions of Mike Gillislee and Rex Burkhead, it's going to be tough for not only Brandon Bolden but DJ Foster, another guy I really like on this team. They're going to have to get creative to keep these guys around. And Bolden was very funny today, talking with the media about his young baby. That we won't repeat what he said on the air, but it was.
Okay, I will. She eats a lot. She poops a lot. Who doesn't want that? And everybody, smiled and laughed and had a good time. And Brandon Bolden's a very relaxed guy. And maybe I overstated when I said, there's a good chance he won't make the squad. Guys like that, Bill Belichick always seems to find a way to keep on the roster.
That's very true. And he's been such a core special teams guy. It's going to be a very, very difficult decision for Belichick and the coaching staff to decide who they're going to keep and not, and he's a guy that's proven.
Let's ask you about one more player that on the bubble that may surprise some people, and that's Kony Ealy. We all assumed when he was brought here from the Carolina Panthers that he was an edge guy. He was a definite pass threat that they could plug in, certainly on third down situations. But then word surfaced that he and Belichick, according to Ealy, had a thing going on. And what Belichick, I thought, tried to do in one of his press conferences this past week was kind of clarify the situation. Look, we're asking Ealy to do a lot of things he didn't necessarily do in Carolina, namely play a little bit more inside, play in certain gaps that he did not do in Carolina. Your read on Kony Ealy and whether he is, a lock to make this roster?
I don't think he's a lock, but I don't think he's on the bubble. I wouldn't quite go that far yet. And Belichick mentioned that on Thursday when we were standing there for his press conference, that they've asked him to do a lot of things, and they're trying to see all the different things that he can do. So naturally he's going to struggle, I believe, at least initially doing the things that, he hasn't been asked to do before. And they've had him playing inside more, but I believe that he's going to be here and make this roster.
All right, Steve Balestrieri, you can read his terrific stuff on PatsFans.com. Thank you very much for joining us, Steve. It's been a pleasure. We look to hopefully have you back soon. You can read my stuff on CLNS Media on the Patriots Report, and we'll certainly bring you up to date as we count the days down towards finally having football back here at Gillette Stadium. The preseason opener is on Thursday against Jacksonville Jaguars. Monday and Tuesday, they will have joint practices, which are open to the media. They will have a walkthrough on Wednesday morning. That is not open to the public. And then, of course, the game on Thursday night at 7:30 here at Gillette Stadium. Should be some very fascinating storylines to follow. You can do all of that on clnsradio.com. Outside Gillette Stadium, where the rain held off just in time for us to do this, he is Steve Balestrieri. I'm Mike Petraglia, CLNS Media.